West could say to Putin, you've got to give up the territory that thus far, and if you don't, then I'm afraid we are going to lay down some very, very tough conditions, and maybe NATO will have to expand.
The impact of Nigel Farage's decision to take over the official leadership of Reform UK and stand in the election is hard to overstate. Even today, Rishi Sunak will speak out against reform and try to bring Farage's supporters to the Conservatives. It hasn't been an easy few days for Nigel Farage. Some of his supporters have been revealed as racist, misogynist and even supporters of Hitler. 3 candidates have been disowned for their extremism. Surely more will have to happen. He also had a rather bruising encounter with the BBC's Fiona Bruce on Question Time.
Go back over to France, I don't know if you've got a landing craft or something, and then you make them. No, hang on. Let's just the practicalities. I think that's what Dee's asking. And then they step out onto the sand, or onto. What happens at that moment?
Well,
do you think the French are just going to take?
Well, they've come from the sand. But here's the point.
No, but do you think how is that going to work? No, do you think the French will just accept it?
If they know they can't stay, they won't come. And it's interesting to think. In the last year of the Labour government, they deported 47,000 people who'd come here illegally.
Okay, but they won't stay if they won't come if they can't stay. Dee's asking very specifically, how will it work? So your plan?
I'm telling you,
them in small. Hang on.
Now, Nigel Farage says that he won't talk to the BBC after that, but he will talk to Times Radio, and we can speak to him now. Good morning to you.
Hello. Good morning.
You're laughing. What? You weren't laughing at the time, I don't think, though, were you?
Well, it was extraordinary. I mean, it was a Question Time supposedly with an audience of the public, and the first person that asked a question had produced 8 programmes for the BBC, including the modern, rather woke Doctor Who. The third person who asked a question has been raising money for candidates in the general election that are standing up for Gaza, whatever that means. And I mean, it was just nothing that reflected the British people in any way at all. And frankly, with Fiona Bruce, I mean, wasn't much point me turning up, really. I couldn't get a word in.
I suppose, well, she was just being a journalist, I suppose, wasn't she? That was her job.
Well, I think the job of a journalist is to listen to what people say and then,
to
of
challenge.
Course, to ask questions about it. But as you heard from that exchange, really, I mean, they might as well turn the microphone off.
Let's just see what the BBC say about this. We refute these claims. Last night's Question Time audience was made up of broadly similar levels of representation from Reform UK and the Green Party, with the other parties represented too. There were also a number of people with a range of political views who were still making up their mind.
I'm sorry, I don't buy it. I've just given you the examples of the first and third questioner. These were not members of the public. I know, frankly, very, very disappointing, given that we have to pay the BBC all this money every year.
You've been on Question Time 36 times, apparently, since 2000. That's more than anyone else standing for election this year. Is it fair to say that you owe Question Time quite a lot for your high profile?
Well, I mean, hopefully I've been quite good for their ratings over the years and provided, some argument, some debate. I mean, part of the problem, if you look at this general election and how boring it was to begin with, is if you really look at the manifestos, there's so little to choose between Labour and Conservative. So look, over the years when David Dimbleby was doing it, I had no problem. I've never complained in the past about Question Time. I've done 35 without complaint, but the 36th just wasn't good enough.
So does this mean that until the BBC apologise, you won't appear on the BBC?
No, I don't really need to. I mean, I'm sorry. I just think they're complete. The first day of the campaign, I was giving a speech and the BBC were covering it on the news channel, and they cut away and said, oh, well, there's Nigel Farage using his customary inflammatory language. And that was how this campaign started. I did actually get a public apology from them on it, but they've been more of a political actor than a neutral BBC, in my view.
Right. So I just want to double check then, because I want a lot of people are listening very, closely to you. They're deciding where they're gonna vote. Are you saying that you're not going to appear on the BBC in any form until they apologise for Question Time?
That's my current position.
Okay.
Although Channel 4 are rather worse, but hey.
Well, we're going to get onto that now. You're also you're angry with Channel 4 News. You say the party activist that they filmed calling the PM an effing P word is an actor.
This guy is an actor, a very posh actor who does an act, an alter ego of what he calls rough speaking. And he turned up in our campaign office. No one knew who he was, but, political campaigns call for volunteers. And right from the minute he walked through the door, he was doing his version of rough speaking. He got into a car with someone who we now know was a Channel 4 undercover reporter. There were 3 reform activists in the back. He goaded them, tried to get them to say nasty, unpleasant, racist things. When they didn't play, he obliged himself. The whole thing is an absolute stitch-up. I mean, frankly, it's the worst stitch-up I've seen in all my years in politics.
Right, let's see what Channel 4 say. We strongly stand by a rigorous and duly impartial journalism which speaks for itself. We met Mr Parker for the first time at Reform UK Party HQ, where he was a Reform Party canvasser. We did not pay the Reform UK canvasser or anyone else in that report. Mr Parker was not known to Channel 4 News and was filmed covertly via the undercover operation. So just to clarify, this guy's an actor. He says himself that he is a canvasser for Reform UK. Is it possible that he could be both?
He is an actor. He's also a journalist. He also advertises on a separate site, Undercover Filming. So he's both an actor and a sort of journalist reporter. And for Channel 4 to say they don't know, he's worked for Channel 4 himself in the past, all right? So, I mean, honestly, it was so crude, it was almost unbelievable. It was sort of like a sort of Alf Garnett rant, but it was designed to stitch us up. And for Channel 4, well, it's fine for them. They didn't make the film. They subcontracted out to somebody else to make it. And that, of course, gives Channel 4 full deniability.
Right. One of the questions that you were asked on Question Time was why extremists gravitate to your party. There have been quite a few problems. I mean, would you accept that? You've had to remove more than 100 candidates since January. Is that right?
I don't know is the answer to that, because I only came in 4 weeks ago today. Up until that point, I was honorary. I mean, look, Reform has been a very, very small party, a start-up. They put out a big Charlie call for candidates. Clearly, some of those that have applied are wholly unsuitable. And if they were weeding out and getting rid of the wrong ones, well, that's good. Ironically, one of the problems is this. I pretty much single-handedly did for the BNP, by going to their voters. And remember, you go back 15 years, they were getting very strong. And I went to BNP voters and said, look, if you're voting BNP as a protest, but don't share their racist ideology, come and vote for us. And the BNP have disappeared. So these few fringy, and they are not many of them, these few fringy characters, who do hold deeply prejudicial views, they've kind of got nowhere else to go. But I want to make it absolutely clear, as I did yesterday at the rally in Birmingham, I said to 4,500 people, if anyone shares these views, please leave the room now.
And did anyone leave?
One poor chap was on his way to the loo. I felt a bit sorry for him, actually.
Right.
But
But the point is that you can say that, but people are not going to leave, are they? They're just going to keep, because some people have some terrible opinions, and they're going to stay, aren't they, and kind of operate undercover, so to speak.
When I ran UKIP in the last few years, I wouldn't allow anybody, even as a member, who'd been part of an organisation like the BNP. And how interesting that despite all these smears, you got polling yesterday showing that Reform now has more black and ethnic minority voters than Liberal Democrats. So Channel 4 can do what they want. People out there are bright enough to work things out for themselves.
Okay, but Nigel Farage, I want to we're going to move on and talk about a few other things, but I just want to concentrate on a few of the worst examples, because we're getting a lot of text, some in support and some are very, very angry with Reform and with you. So the 3 candidates that you've had to withdraw support from: Edward Oakenfool, who posted derogatory comments about the IQ of sub-Saharan Africans on social media last year; Robert Lomas, who reportedly said, and I apologise for some of this language, black people should get off their lazy arses and stop acting like savages; Leslie Lilly, who reportedly described people arriving on small boats as scum in a social media post, adding, "I hope your family get robbed, beaten or attacked." Those are the candidates. George Jones, this is the final one for the time being. He's a party volunteer. I think you know him quite well because he's a long-time party activist. He called the pride flag on a police car a degenerate flag and repeatedly suggests that members of the LGBT plus community are paedophiles and criticises police attending pride. That's a pretty horrendous litany, isn't it?
It is, and you've just seen, of course, the Warwick University Conservative Association singing a Nazi song.
Yes.
But I don't suppose Rishi Sunak will even get asked about that. Look, let's be clear. This is a start-up party. I took it over a month ago. There were some people there that should never, ever have been there, and I'm sorry for that. And nobody is angrier than I am, particularly as we're doing so well with black and ethnic minority voters. And you would have seen, again, not covered by the media, obviously, but you would have seen highly successful practicing Muslim businessman, one of our main speakers yesterday. He's very worried about the growth of extremism in our towns and our cities. So yes, some bad apples in a startup. They're gone, and I won't have anyone like it in the future in the party. I'm going to put this thing under a much stricter control.
But those three that I mentioned, they are still on the ballot paper with Reform UK next to their name.
Yeah, I know. And the Greens have had to suspend even more than we have. So, a Rush election. I did, by the way, pay 144 grand to a London vetting company who didn't do the work. So I did try to weed out the wrong ones, and I got badly let down.
Apparently they were just a platform, though. You had to do the vetting yourself.
Well, yeah, but I mean, we have, literally, when I took this over a month ago, we had hardly any staff and no money. What we've done in the space of a month to build up the level of momentum that we have in the country, the enthusiasm of thousands of people at short notice turning up at our events. Yes, we've got things to sort out, as every party does. But believe me, something is happening out there.
Do you think perhaps you should have fielded fewer candidates and had better quality control?
Look, I can't answer that. It was all done before I put my hat in the ring. I can't answer that.
Okay. Let's talk about Vladimir Putin. We all saw that stunt. I think it was at the weekend, wasn't it? I love Nigel Farage. You were very angry about that.
It's a hoax.
It was a
hoax.
It's a
hoax. No, it's been happening ever since the day of Brexit. Ever since the day of Brexit, it's been the Russia hoax. Nigel Farage is funded by the Kremlin. Hillary Clinton said that. The Leave campaign was funded by Russia. That finished up in the end 3 years in the courts until Aaron Banks, who was the person that was defamed, won his case. And now they're doing it again. And I've never said anything nice about Putin. I think what he's done in Ukraine is absolutely reprehensible at every level. And what I'm being called out for is standing up 10 years ago in the European Parliament saying there will be a war in Ukraine. The fact that I was right and the rest of the establishment was wrong, for some reason, it seems to be...
I want to put this question to you, if I may, on this, because it's a very good question, actually. It comes from James, one of our listeners, says, can you ask Nigel Farage, is your policy on Ukraine to persuade Zelensky to accept the loss of territory to Russia stolen through occupation? What would you actually do about foreign policy in relation to Russia and Ukraine? How would you answer that?
Well, in terms of foreign policy, just very quickly, I was vehemently opposed to the Iraq war, vehemently opposed to the Libyan war, and I think our foreign policy towards Iran and much else has been catastrophic. How the hell David Cameron is back in Foreign Secretary, I don't know. What I see in Ukraine is a tragedy, nearly 1 million battle casualties so far, no sign of this ending, a stalemate that may go on for many, many, many more years. Of course, all wars end in one of two ways, either annihilation or negotiation. I would have thought negotiation was rather important. I would have thought the West could say to Putin, you've got to give up the territory that you thus far, and if you don't, then I'm afraid we are going to lay down some very, very tough conditions, and maybe NATO will have to expand. I just think the sheer scale of human tragedy, there ought to be negotiations.
But what would that mean for Ukraine? What would they have to give up? That was the question.
Well, no, I think that Russia have to give up. Russia have to give up, the ground they've taken. I mean, clearly, the very difficult thing is going to be Crimea. That is going to be the difficult bit. I don't think Russia giving up what they've taken in the last couple of years would be a problem. I don't know. I could be wrong.
Okay.
All I know is what is happening is a tragedy. And actually, to some extent, it may have been avoided.
Right. Okay. Someone else has asked a question about Donald Trump, who's a good friend of yours. Can you ask Nigel Farage, says Otter, if Donald Trump won the 2020 election and if he was properly, fairly and justly convicted by a New York jury, the people of the UK should be entitled to know if Nigel Farage believes in democracy and the rule of law?
I do believe in the rule of law, but I think the American judicial system absolutely stinks. It's become politicized. There is almost no such thing as a fair trial in America now. 98% of cases end in plea bargaining, guilty verdicts. They've completely corrupted it. I thought what happened in New York was an absolute joke. As for 2020, look, the election wasn't stolen because there were no laws to stop what happened. Tens of millions of ballots sent out in the post, being harvested on the door, and there were no laws in place in those states to stop it from happening. Would I want to see a fundamental change to postal voting here? You bet your life I would. In fact, the one country that I trust with voting is France, where you basically have to turn up on the day and vote.
Okay. Finally, you've made it clear that you want to see the Tory party punished. What if a group of Conservatives came up to you and said, join us, help us form a new version of the Conservative Party? Do you have any interest in that?
Well, for the moment, the Conservative Party is a broad church with no religion. I mean, they don't agree on anything. They don't stand for anything other than their own jobs or ministerial cars. I mean, frankly, the Conservative Party virtually doesn't exist. This is for reform. Thursday is the first big step. And what we're going to do over the next few years is to build a mass movement for real change. And that includes the electoral system and much else.
Okay, but can you rule out joining the Conservatives at some point in the future?
I honestly don't even see it as a possibility.
Okay, and how many seats do you think you're going to win on Thursday, Reform?
I literally haven't got a clue. The polling is so varied and so wide. The Express and the Mirror put us on 21% on Friday. Others say it's 15.
But in terms of seats?
No idea. Literally no idea.
What would be a good result?
Well, we're going to win seats. The MRP poll last week said we win 18 seats. I haven't got a clue.
Okay. Nigel Farage, thank you for talking to us. That's Nigel Farage. He's leader of Reform UK.